One of our favorite pastimes here at Fresh Baked is to comment on some of the things said by Disney executives. Some of it isn't fun. Some of it is to cast a light on some things that the Disney company does that we disagree with. And sometimes it's to defend the Disney company. CEO Bob Chapek spoke to the Wall Street Journal the other day at their Tech Live conference, and we got a little of each. And we're going to talk about those comments next on Fresh Baked. Hi guys, David here with Fresh Baked, and I gotta say, I always love it when Disney executives go on record and start talking about the Disney company. It's a great opportunity to get some insight on some of their thinking, some of their processes, and also an opportunity to help fans of the park, fans of the Disney company, better understand what it is they're truly saying, to sort of decode their message. The nearly 40-minute interview with the Wall Street Journal covered a lot of ground, and that ground included the Disneyland Resort. The host opens up the discussion about the parks by asking about supply and demand.
With high demand for the parks, does that suggest there's room to grow the parks, open more parks, that the parks business will continue to change? And again, taking a long view, where does parks need to go for you?
For what it's worth, Chapek did not answer that question, which kind of, that bumped me out a little bit, because he said, hey, he's asking him, giving him a chance, are we getting more Disney parks? When is that going to happen? So the fact that he didn't answer that question suggests that they probably don't have any plans. Kind of a bummer, but then I wasn't really expecting a comment about more Disney parks, but that would have been fun. That would have been a good soundbite if he did.
You mentioned the passionate Disney fan base. It is passionate. They go online, they have forums, they debate your pricing.
They do.
Some love it, some hate it.
Who loves Disney pricing? I'm just curious. The guy said some people love it. Who loves Disney increasing their prices? But actually, this comment was more, I'm sure he didn't mean that. He's just, playing interviewer. But it gave Chapek an opportunity to discuss their feelings, their thoughts on supply and demand, and how it relates to the guest experience in the parks.
We want to guarantee a great guest experience no matter when people come.
He goes on to say,
In a world where we don't control demand, you're left with one of two situations. You either let way too many people into the park where they don't have a great experience, or you manage it by just turning people away at the gate. Now imagine if you're a family from Seattle and you come to Disneyland, you come for a 2 or 3 day stay, you're there at 10 o'clock in the morning and you're turned away.
This is actually similar to his comments about that family from Colorado. And he's saying this as if to suggest that this is a thing that happened all the time pre-COVID. It did not. And that family from Seattle that's getting to the park at 10 a.m., they're not being kept out of the park. But I will say that it could have happened. There is a scenario where it's possible that guests showing up at Disneyland might have been told they can't come in. But those conditions are such that that family from Seattle would have had a very casual approach towards getting to the park. If they lacked, urgency. By that I mean the parks then were closed before noon. It was usually late in the afternoon, early evenings when they decided to close the parks out to new guests. That family from Seattle at 10 a.m., they're getting in the parks. We've had this conversation before. That's such a very rare scenario. So yes, it is possible, but I can also tell you a story about another family. A family that I met on the bus heading back to the Toy Story parking lot. This family is coming from Canada. And this family showed up on a random weekday morning. They showed up to Disneyland, and they didn't have a reservation. They didn't know they needed a reservation. They were not allowed in the park. There were no reservations available. They were told they can't come in. They had to get back on the bus and go. I don't know where they went. Did they go back home? I don't know. Now, you could say that it's their fault for not having a reservation. They should have known that was a thing, that reservations are necessary. But is it? Is it safe to say, is it safe to assume that the casual visitor from Canada who comes once a year, once every couple years, these are guests that Disney seems to be very fond of in terms of talking about them when they're relating anecdotes about the reservation system. Should it be expected that this family from Canada understands that a reservation is necessary? Now, obviously, this is a rare situation. I'm not saying this to suggest that this is something that happens regularly, but neither is the parks being too full to allow guests at the gate to come in. That happens maybe once or twice a year, if that, And normally there is some kind of a heads up. And normally you kind of know. It's the kind of days when you know you shouldn't be messing around. We're talking about New Year's Eve, late in the Christmas season, that kind of thing. Meanwhile, the Wall Street Journal wrote a follow-up article where they were highlighting some of the things that Chapek said in this interview, and where they paraphrased some of Chapek's comments about all the changes that have been happening with the Disney parks recently. Per the Wall Street Journal, Mr. Chapek said the changes, including higher prices, pricey add-ons, and an online reservation system, these are to limit crowd size at the parks. He didn't say this. He talked about the guest experience, but he didn't say anything specific to using these systems as a means to limit crowd size. Two, it's simply not correct. And I encourage anybody who's watching this video to apply a discerning eye towards this line of thinking. It's something that is commonly misrepresented when it comes to the reservation system. It is not in place to control park attendance. Disney is absolutely and definitively in control of how many people they let in the park, simply by turning on or off the faucet with respect to total crowd, allowed in, at least within relation to the fire marshal capacity. What is safe? What is the safe number of guests to allow into the park? The maximum capacity. Now, reduced crowd size can be a side effect, a byproduct of the reservation system, but that's simply guests choosing not to go, giving up, deciding on their own. The guests decide, this is too much for me, I don't want to bother. And this is illustrated by the fact that today, with the parks as busy as they've ever been since they reopened, the reservation calendar is more or less wide open. There have been days recently where the crowds have been borderline unbearable to some guests, and yet on those days, you could still make a reservation. So if the statement by the Wall Street Journal is correct, then those days should be booked. If Disney's trying to control the attendance, if those days are deemed busy or too busy, then why am I able to make a reservation? And the answer to that, obviously, is because it's not. It's not too busy. It's not too full. Disney doesn't want fewer people in the parks. They want more people in the parks.
In a world where we don't control demand, you're left with one of two situations. You either let way too many people into the park where they don't have a great experience, or you manage it by just turning people away at the gate.
By the way, speaking to Chapek's comments about Disney not being able to control demand, that's a true statement. Guests are in charge of demand, and Disney is in charge of supply. But there are things that Disney can do to effect demand. Disney, for example, can make the park worse, thereby creating less demand in guests.
But more importantly, it protects the guest experience so that when you get into the park, you can have confidence it's not going to be overcrowded.
So here he's defending the reservation system by saying that it improves the guest experience, that it protects the guest experience, which if that were the only thing that Disney were doing, the only change that they've made to the parks since they've reopened, I might be inclined to give them the benefit of the doubt. But I would ask you, is the guest experience improved by making them go through all that anxiety of making a park reservation as opposed to just showing up? I submit that it has created more anxiety than existed previously. Meanwhile, they've created this Genie Plus monster that is certainly not an improvement on the guest experience over before. They're telling you it does, but anybody who goes to the parks regularly, who has applies a little bit of critical thinking, will tell you that the actual best scenario for the guest experience is standby only. No Fast Pass, no Max Pass, no Genie Plus, no Lightning Lane. Standby only is the actual best service that Disney could provide for the guest experience. That's the best experience for everyone, that is. Genie Plus might make the experience better for some, the people who buy it, but it is considerably worse for the people who don't buy Genie Plus. I mean, that's pretty obvious. Now, I could talk about Genie Plus and Lightning Lane for days, in terms of what Disney is really doing with these systems. But let me just say this. I think it's safe to say that Genie Plus professes to fix a problem that didn't exist until Genie Plus became a thing. The existence of Genie Plus creates the problem, extra long standby lines, that it's supposed to fix. We wouldn't have those extra long standby lines if there was no Genie Plus or Lightning Lane.
So that we, have pricing be a reflection of how many people we can actually let in and still guarantee that great experience. So for some of our fans, that's heresy.
He's not the least bit wrong about this. Disney should be able to adjust their pricing based on demand in the same way that literally every other company in the world gets to do. He's also correct that some Disney fans see that any kind of price increase from the Disney company as some kind of heresy. But go anywhere to anywhere in the world and you're going to find higher prices. Now, from the long view, Disney is still able to basically dictate their price. They can name their price on going to Disneyland. Disney guests have shown and still show today very little resistance to the ever-increasing prices. The price of Disneyland is not a factor, in my opinion, on demand, or at least I should say there is plenty of excess demand to account for whatever percentage of guests dropped out, opt out whenever a price increase happens. There is still way more demand than they would lose in those cases. But that's not where they're going to see a reduction in demand. They're not going to see a decrease, a major visible decrease in demand simply by raising prices. This will be more likely due to all of the other stuff that they do, namely the things we've mentioned, the reservation system, Genie Plus and Lightning Lane, and the constant search for perceived gaps in value, identifying those gaps in value, and then monetizing them. Look for more of this in the future. Things like paid Magic Morning, things like paid preferred seating for parades and fireworks and all that. There is already the dining packages. Look for dining packages to just go away, and instead of getting a meal, you're just paying for the seat. I know this is going to sound wild, but even prepare for or expect something like flex pricing on product, on merchandise. Let's say, as demand hits during the peak, the beginning of the Halloween season, the beginning of the Christmas season, that kind of thing. Look for demand pricing on merchandise.
If we move a churro cart 10 feet, it's a big deal.
So far, most of the comments I've simply found issue with. I want to debate that thing that they've said. I disagree with the thing that they've said. This one kind of upset me a little. If a non-superfan were to hear this comment from Chapek, let's say, for example, the very kind of people that are attending the Wall Street Journal Tech Live, they're not going to be your garden variety Disneyland superfan. They're going to hear Chapek say that and they're going to think, seriously? Disney fans get upset about a churro cart being moved? That's insane. That needs to be put in check. Let the man run his multinational $150 billion company. What are you talking about churro carts for? Now, I will say that there might be a blog post about that churro cart moving 10 feet. You might hear about it on social media, on Twitter. Somebody might say, hey, did you notice they moved the churro cart? But it is by no means a big deal, not to anyone. Okay, so he might be exaggerating to make a point for fun, perhaps. But in the same breath, the very next thing he says.
Yeah. If we change, an attraction, from Tower of Terror to Guardians of the Galaxy, while the lines went from 30 minutes long to 6 hours long.
But they would come out.
He has equated moving a churro cart 10 feet to a 6-hour wait for Mission Breakout. Check that. He is insinuating that we equate moving a churro cart to a 6-hour wait at Mission Breakout, which, by the way, doesn't exist. But in other words, he's saying we're too passionate, also known as insane about Disney. We're too passionate to be trusted with how big business works. Now, I'm the first to admit that I am not as smart as Bob Chapek. He is a very intelligent man. That is plain to see. I've never run a theme park. I've never built a ride. Never studied social engineering and how it relates to crowd management and that kind of thing. I don't fully understand yield management, but I'm not stupid either. And it's comments like this that makes me think he thinks we're dumb. It makes me think that this is how he talks about us when he's talking about the parks to other people who do understand those things. You guys get it, right? Wall Street Journal, you get it. What about these guys and their churro carts? I think that actually, to be honest, I think they want it that way. They don't like it when we are educated about the processes that happen at Disneyland. I feel like Ken Potrick was even on record as saying that Disneyland guests are too smart. I don't know. Okay, so that's parks. Let's move on from that. I want to talk about some other comments he made with regard to programming and Disney Plus. Specifically, moving their programming incrementally beyond just simple kids programming on Disney+. You may have noticed Deadpool show up on your feed recently. Pam and Tommy was on the service for a bit, which they mentioned in that Wall Street Journal interview. The media took his comments about programming, specifically animation or shows aimed at kids, and made it sound like adults don't watch animation or don't like kids programming. This, from my perspective, is a total misrepresentation of his actual comments.
I'll withhold judgment on any one title, but what I will tell you is every day, even after 30 years, I am amazed at the elasticity of the Disney brand. Put their kids to bed at night after watching Pinocchio, they're probably not going to tune into another animated movie.
I love Pixar. I love Disney movies. I watch them every day with my family, but he is not wrong in the least bit about this. When I put Sophia to bed every night, I am ready for something else. And it's not because I don't love Pixar or animation or kids programming. His comments are about also thinking of adults beyond that programming. Disney fans are considerably more than just fans of Disney. We also love horror, pure sci-fi, punk rock, football, true crime. He wants to think of adults not just as parents of children. Offer them something more than just, life lessons from a talking cricket. And is that so wrong? I don't think it is. And in a world where there are literally dozens of streaming services, how do you keep viewers on your streaming service? How do you keep Disney Plus guests from going in the night, going over to Netflix or Paramount or Amazon Prime to watch something that isn't kids programming? They want to keep you on Disney Plus longer. I totally get that. In the same way that they want to sell more tickets, more merch, and everything else that they do. If they had every season of Forensic Files on Disney Plus, I would probably camp out there for a little while. Okay, with that, one final clip that I want to comment on.
You have to make sure that the cast is at the center of everything that you do.
Prove it. Pay your cast more. Treat them better. Make them feel valued. Make them believe that you believe that they are the center of the show, because that is the truth. Cast members are the center of the show. Show them that you care. Show them that you believe that. Don't bicker over $1 an hour. Just give them that dollar. Give them $2 an hour. You got to give action to get action. Wages should be kept in pace with inflation. You want to talk about respecting and following economic principles. That is a fundamental economic principle. Wages need to be commensurate with the rate of inflation. Thank you for listening to my TED Talk. And then follow us on Instagram at _FreshBaked, on Twitter at FreshBakedDisney, that's fresh with no E, and on TikTok at FreshBakedDisney. And if you like our show and want to show your support, please do consider joining our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/freshbaked. Otherwise, thanks again for watching, everybody. We love you. Be safe out there. Be kind to one another. And Fresh Baked.